Hello, it's Wizard Wells again. Kade Wells, Harrisburg North Middle School, Harrisburg, South Dakota. I wanted to start doing a little branch away. I'll do lots more D&D stuff as I think of it, as it comes up, as I think there's something interesting to show you. I will be definitely filming little bits from when I rotate groups and fight the kids. But I wanted to let you kind of maybe get a look at what class regular activities look like in a classroom of a lifelong role player and gamer. So I'm going to share with you today the Ready Player One challenge that I do with my English 1 kids. So a little overview. Ready Player One, Ernest Cline, his first book, awesome story. Very first thing I have to do with that book is send an email. It's got some swears in there, some coming of age situations, some things. In that email, I also provide feedback from groups of parents whose kids have gone through the challenge before, and I include their quotes, and they're very sentimental and effective at saying, yes, this was a very fun and effective thing for our family to do together. So you notice I'm mentioning family doing stuff together. So the Ready Player One challenge is basically hunting for Halliday's egg. They have to watch movies, read at least one book, listen to songs, and play old games from a list that I provide for them that I'll show you here in just a moment. But they accrue points for those different activities. And we've got a leaderboard over here. I'll take you across the way. So here's our leaderboard, our Ready Player One leaderboard. And I have them put, it's going to be backwards, so whatever. I have them put gamer tags in instead of their names, but they're in alphabetical order, and I often write like just real tiny what the student's name is actually under there. And each Monday, after a week of work or whatever, I take the code, which is back here underneath this. But books are worth 25 points, movies are worth 10, games are worth 5, and songs are worth 2 points. And there's a color code for that, and we simply just put them up there. Now, what I attempt to do is, like, when a kid plays a game, I'll put some sort of numeric, some sort of letter value. They all had to play me in Joust. If you're familiar with the Ready Player One book, they have to joust a lich, and so that's a backwards J for you, but it's a frontwards J for me. So that indicates they played me in Joust, and you see all the kids. And so I have yet two more kids to play in Joust. They haven't beaten me yet, which is really funny. So if they beat me, they get an uncommon magic item from the Dungeon Master's Guide of their choice. So they can pick literally whatever they want. I did rares last year, and 2 kids beat me, and one kid picked a Helm of Teleportation, and the other kid picked a Flame Tongue Dagger, I think, and he was a rogue. And both of those instances were really pretty broken. The Helm of Teleportation especially really made things difficult for their DM. But I mean, cool that in the experience, them winning just that match, I get to give them something that didn't cost anything, that had great value to the student, that still had an effect in class for them. So it's a really neat reward, is to give them an item for their D&D character, right? Like, why would you do anything else for a Ready Player One challenge? So what else to show you? I'll show you I'll share screen real quick and show you the thing. The chart. Okay. Try to adjust here a little bit. I'm going to pull this down just a little bit. Okay, so here is a list, and I'm going to put this in the description so you guys can, it'll be a forced copy thing. When you press the link, it'll make you your own copy of this. And if you teach English 1, English 2, or English 3, maybe even English 4, I can see this being really, really fun. So it is essentially like role-playing the book in a lot of ways. In most respects, they're playing Artemis, they're playing Wade Watts, and they're doing the things that those characters had to do. The design is, and in the parent email, I include this list and say, the kids are competing. The grand prize is a Nintendo emulator, which we use a lot during this project, but it's a Nintendo emulator, like $60 online. It's a great gift. It's just a neat thing, to give them. And then I buy a new one for my classroom because I need one every year. So every year I give a kid away a Nintendo emulator, and we usually do, like, for the top 3 places, do a Hero Forge mini for each one of those guys, where they get to make their character miniature and stuff. Though we're making miniatures in tech class already, so I might come up with something different for a prize, but it's got to be something neat, right? And you can do however many placeholders you want. And some of the kids will really get into this, of course, because they like competition. And just the idea of using your brain to win, when kids are not always real athletic, the idea that they get to use their intellect as a challenge is quite neat for them. So here on the left-hand side, you're seeing authors. These are all the authors referenced in Ready Player One, but I've added to this list as time has gone on because the only real motivation behind this is to get kids to consume media. Okay, I don't care what it is, because music today is not what music used to be, and movies today are not what movies used to be, and even books today are not what books used to be. So the beginning of our unit, the title of our unit is called Great Beginnings, and so I thought Ready Player One would be an awesome tool to exhibit not only coming of age, because that's also part of the unit, but this idea of great beginnings. Because if it wasn't for all of this stuff, Dungeons and Dragons and Ray Bradbury and Tolkien, etc., Zelensky, we would not have any of the games, any of the movies, any of the stuff that we really enjoy had that not all come first. Furthermore, a lot of the musicians are quite great. My kids are starting to pick up on The Cure, and of course, so these are just really, really great nostalgic things. And so this relates to their families because they're doing these things with their families to a great degree. And so there's been lots of conversations where they open this up at dinner on Fridays or breakfast on Saturdays, and the parents look at the list of stuff, and they, as a family, are choosing the movies to watch so that the kids can get their points for the challenge. And just as an excuse to force the kids to spend time with their parents, because they're in middle school, they're in the process of branching away from their parents. This is like kind of forcing them back in. But these are the movies that us parents grew up with, and so it'd be very exciting to get a Saturday movie night with the kiddos, and at your house. And kids in the past have done movie parties where they invite everybody from the class over to a house, and they watch a movie in like a parents' theater kind of thing, and they all get the points for it. But that's what this is really all about, is just like in the book, it's about togetherness and about having something to do together that is more than just social media, as an example. So here you have the authors, and these should be familiar to anybody who's watching this, because you're a nerd like me. So, and you can add whatever books you want if you decide to do this unit. Who cares what books there are? There are clearly some that I don't have here. And I've added some that should have been here. So I'm just looking to see if I added Stephen King. Yeah, the Dark Tower series is there. We'll had lots of kids like that book. So in order to complete the actual assignment, they have to get 100 points, and they have to do one of each. So they have to read a book, play one game, watch one movie, and listen to at least one song. That's not going to get them to 100 points, but it needs to be understood that they have to do one of each, because that's the scholastic thing, right? You got to read a book. And so the book just ends up being something they do independently. They got to read it as they go along. And as of yet, I have not built an assessment around that reading of the book. And I know that probably seems really weird, because the kid could just say, I already read that book. And I do make them talk about what the book was about with the class, and basically present it and offer it like a book talk. Like, is this book worth reading? Who that in this class would like this book? And so that's kind of how we deal with it, because I don't want the challenge itself to become this laborious assessment laden thing. I want it to be fun, and the hardest part about that is the book, of course. And so whatever you feel like you want to do for that, if they have to do a little book report or whatever, is fine. But I don't try to make it a great big deal, mostly because it's supposed to be fun. Okay, moving away from books. Here's the movie list. Add whatever you want, as long as it was made between 76 and 92, I pretty much let it go. I think of 91, 92 as sort of a late extension of the 80s in a lot of ways. And then, of course, grunge, really began to change the way that music would look. And I kind of cut it off at that point, because that societal change it goes away from the pop of the 80s pretty considerably, and gets us into some much more serious territory in the 90s. As anyone who grew up like I did, mostly as a child of the 90s, I think I was 10 in 1990. So though I was a child during the 80s and remember lots of it very fondly, the 90s I remember being a very serious, rather kind of a dark time for society. So we started 76 because that's when Star Wars was in theaters. And, a little bit before that, if that's what you want, who cares? A little bit after 92, who cares? It doesn't matter. What you're getting the kids to do is look back into the history of movies, games, books and songs and retrieve something valuable from it. So you got Poltergeist, Bill and Ted's, Blue Lagoon, E.T., the Aliens trilogy, the first one, Gremlins, either one with both, three, whatever, Labyrinth, Heather's, Dark Crystal, Never Ending Story, Batman, the OG ones, of course. And that brings up another conversation. Can they watch a new Batman? I mean, I don't know. It's not really part of the thing, but who really cares? Again, you're getting them to, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but kids don't watch movies anymore. They can't really stomach the time it takes to do it. YouTube and Snapchat and Instagram have all but completely ruined that part of their brains. And so this, again, although it seems maybe stupid to teachers to say, hey, kids, you got to go home and watch movies, considering they don't read books anymore like kids used to. Kids don't even watch movies anymore like they used to. So like give them something to do to activate their mind. And then did they like the movie? Did they not? I gave one of my favorite students, Dragon Slayer, the original Dragon Slayer, old school LucasArts. And, I thought like, if anybody's going to like this movie, it's probably going to be this kid. And he brings it back on Monday. He's shaking his head. He hands it to me. He's like, that was so bad. I'm like, but good, bad, right? And he's like, I don't know. I think it was just bad. And so I had to explain to him, that was right after they created the technology where the camera moves and the objects stand still. And so they were in the process of making this dragon actually fly, and nobody had ever seen anything like that before. And he's like, no. But he watched it anyway, and therefore he knows now the movie Dragon Slayer, and he has a better taste of what those really poor, sci-fi / fantasy movies were like. And I think it gives kids a better appreciation for the movies they watch today, because of course if you're watching a Marvel movie anymore, it's like there's no spared expense, right? So it's neat for them to see how things have changed over time. Lots of fantastic movies on this list. When they get to the part in the book where Wade Watts has to do the script of the War Games movie, we watch War Games in class before they do that. Before they read that chapter, we watch War Games, and I have them write a really brief, like 3-paragraph essay, something like 300 to 500 words, about the similarities and the two characters from Wade Watts and David in War Games, the cautionary tale that's being purveyed in both storylines. So it's not like it's just like a movie day. Yeah, we're just watching a movie. It's like there's always got to be something tied to it. I'm usually very good at that. And so they had to write a little essay where they look at War Games in the context of Ready Player One and why it is so pervasive in the storyline. So that was fun. Also, War Games, like many movies of the 80s, they start out kind of slow. They weren't so driven with the need for an immediate hook like things are today, where it's like, oh, a person's going to stop watching this in 2 seconds if there isn't an explosion in the first 5 minutes or whatever. War Games starts out really slow. And then, of course, it's this tensional build as it goes through. So that was also neat to get to talk with them about Ghostbusters, Real Genius, Better Off Dead, Revenge of the Nerds, Mad Max, any of the original trilogy, Beetlejuice, Hawk the Slayer, Jaws, Weekend at Bernie's, Footloose, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Blade Runner, Explorers, great film, Excalibur, one of my all-time old school favorites, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Fantastic Voyage, cool movie, Superman's Fortress of Solitude, or other OG Superman. The Terminator series. I mean, I'll never forget. I know that T2, Terminator 2 was probably 1992, and it was the first time that they had enough CG computer power to make the Terminator walk through the bars, and everybody's like, oh man, it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. So I left the Terminator series on there, even though Terminator 2 came much later than Terminator 1. The movie is awesome still to this day. So, and again, just trying to inspire the kids to watch old movies. Krull, Highlander, The Goonies. A lot of the kids have watched The Goonies after this has started, and they're like, that movie's so good. I'm like, that movie is so good. Jaws, had plenty of kids who hadn't seen Jaws. I think it's kind of wasted on them in some ways, but I get to tell them, it was Steven Spielberg's first movie, and he was 23 years old. They said he was 22. He was actually 23. They wanted him to appear like the wonder child that he really was. Indiana Jones, of course, right? The Matrix is referenced in Ready Player One several times, even though that was late 90s, but since it's actually referenced in the book itself, there's the Matrix. If a kid hadn't seen the Matrix, of course they're going to love that. Then we get into some real bad Ewoks, The Battle for Endor, Caravan of Courage. Those are on Disney Plus now. You couldn't find them anywhere before, but now they're on Disney Plus. Go ahead and watch those bad movies, guys. The Beastmaster. Last year had a young lady who watched The Beastmaster, and she was very impressed, and so I was very happy about that. Christmas Story, Dead Poet Society, Twilight Zone, The Iron Giant. Had a kid watch The Iron Giant, came in yesterday to put the points on the board, and she was ecstatic. She's like, that movie was so fantastic. Everybody needs to watch that. And I told her I always cry at the end when the robot flies towards the warhead and he goes, Superman. He's gonna die. I always cry. Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead, of course, that's canon in terms of what we're doing here. Phantasm, Dark Crystal, etc. Red Dawn, Monty Python, Back to the Future, Top Gun, Predator, or any of the original two. I would say probably the first two Predators. Lost Boys. I mean, like, what the sleeper agent of a movie here, right? Lost Boys, so good, so good. It was sort of the beginning of that teenage vampire trend that pervade all the way to Twilight and so on. The Lost Boys, man, like how much more 80s, iconic 80s can you get than the Lost Boys? Man, legend. I mean, do we need to go on? Misery, I thought, including some of these other sleepers that they're off people's radars anymore. And so as we've gone through this, maybe you've noticed, like, okay, let's use Stand By Me as an example. It's full of swearing. It's a rated R movie, but the kids in it are 13. So what I say in the email to parents is this discretion is up to you. I'm putting in all the movies that would fit for the unit. If this is not your family taste, then don't let your child watch this movie. There are plenty of movies to choose from for them to be able to compete. So if a parent has no problem with watching Stand By Me, as an example, with their kid, that's fine, fantastic, fine with me. And all it does is, of course, is bring the families together, right? That's it. The Craft, Little Monsters, Fred Savage, and Howie Mandel. I mean, kids don't even know this movie exists. Yeah, just awesome. Okay, The Shining. And then we get into series. And in order to get the same credit, because movies and series are the same color on the crib here. In order to get credit for a movie, you have to watch at least 4 episodes, which would be 90 minutes soaking wet. And so that emulates the amount of time spent. So I had a young lady who likes The Simpsons and watched several episodes of that. That's fine. So they're all here, the series. And again, add to it whatever you want. We talked about, as a class, I asked them to put up to a vote if they wanted Stranger Things to count, because clearly the book Ready Player One inspired some of the retro nature. That was all happening kind of at the same time. Ready Player One preceded it by some number of years, but that sort of reawakening of that pop culture seemed to have really taken across our society. And then Stranger Things came, of course, and everyone resolutely said no, that Stranger Things should not count, that everyone should still watch Stranger Things, but that it should not count for our contest. And I said, okay, that's got fine with me. And they had lots of good reasons. So I just left it at that. We got lots of cartoons in the series chunk, lots of cartoons, most of which can be found on YouTube anymore, such as the G.I. Joe cartoon is all on YouTube. He-Man, I believe, much of it is on YouTube. I'm not aware of all of these. I do know that, okay, you got some great ones: Firefly, Battlestar Galactica. I don't care if they watch the old or the somewhat less old Battlestar Galactica. The newer one that they've made, in the last, what was it? Geez, how many years? Maybe within the last 20 years. That's very, very good. So if they want to watch that, it's long. Lots of, getting them interested in stuff, guys. That's what I see our job as teachers, mostly, like the biggest part of my job, as I see it, is to inspire. Okay, to inspire kids. And if I'm not doing that on a regular basis with my instruction or projects or whatever, then I don't think I'm succeeding. And I would say the same is true for teachers across the globe. If you're not inspiring them, then you're not really helping them. Okay. Transformers, GoBots, Land of the Lost. Man, Land of the Lost with the sleek stacks. If you guys remember the sleek stacks, the creepy like lizard people that walk really slow. Oh man. Simon and Simon, a throwback. The Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, or any other Looney Tunes, the D&D cartoon. Music. Of course, all the music you would expect. Now, the music is greatly interpretive. Most of this is pop and rock, but you could add some of the classic country from the time as well. Johnny Cash was still alive and things like that. So there's nothing perfect about this list, but I think that it could be appreciated by anyone who wants to run this unit. And I do suggest that if you have the capability to do so, do it. Please do it. It's so much fun. Games. Big list of games, guys. Donkey Kong, and now Car Wars is on the list. It was on the list originally, and I think they might have mentioned it one time in the book. And if you've never played Car Wars, it's more like Math Wars. It's a really cool concept, but you got to be pretty good at math to actually play it as it stands. My kiddos and I are in the process of making our own car game using some from Car Wars, Rollmaster Burger Time. This is going to be just a list of old games, right? A lot of them are on the Nintendo emulator. Many of them you can find in online arcades and things like that. They're really easy to find. My kids play Contra quite a bit. Every Friday we turn on the Nintendo emulator and they always want to play Contra together. It's fun to play those two-player games because you got to think about this. These kids that are 13, in most cases, guys, they have not sat next to each other and played a game at the same time on the screen. Like, this is something from our time. And it's not that they've never experienced it, but it's not like what we did, where we went to an arcade and there was always two positions, right? So this is sort of new to them in that way. And more games 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 and more games. Okay. So that's the Ready Player One challenge. Also, of course, we read the book. They can break into groups to read the book, and we do a combination of either answering my second and third level depth questions, or they create their own. I ask them, do you guys want to write questions today, or do you want to answer questions today? And they're like, let's make them, let's answer them. And in whichever case, I just flip the assignment, right? So again, that's giving choice. Do you want me to read the chapter to you guys first and you read the next one? Do you just want to break into your groups and you guys start reading together? Do you want me to read it all to you? Do you want a popcorn read? Like, how do you want to read today? They usually choose their reading groups. That's totally fine. Then I just check up on everybody, make sure that everyone's doing what they need to be doing. They're learning together. They decided how that was going to happen. All I did was said, we're going to read this book and here's a project that goes with it. And they pretty much drive the boat for the rest of it, which is always a really good practice, guys. Giving your kids the empowerment to choose the way in which something is fulfilled. It takes a lot of the stigma away from our job as a teacher. It makes them feel like they had some skin in the game. And these are not new philosophies, and I don't really need to go on about it because I would so hope that most people know about student choice. So that is, in a nutshell, I guess, the Ready Player One challenge. The Nintendo emulator is right here, sits on the float, and I'll plug it in when needed, and it just snaps right into our Promethean board, which is cool. We've been starting with like 5 minutes of games for a warm-up, and that's been super fun. So I just pick a game from the list that's on the emulator, and when the kids come in, the game is on, and I can go through maybe 2 or 3 kids depending on how bad they are at it, which they're really bad at these games. Really bad. Games have changed so much. Like, games are now designed to keep you playing. Well, back then they wanted your quarters, right? All the games that are on this emulator, for the most part, even Contra, most people don't even know that Contra was an arcade game. Like, Contra would have taken so many quarters to beat back in the day. That's why they made the Konami code when it came out on the Nintendo. But anyway, one of my little buddies was playing Pac-Man. He's just crushing it. Like, he's just doing awesome. He ends up on like the 4th board, and everybody in the whole room is completely invested. They're yelling. They're like, "Oh, dude, move it!" You know, they're really excited for him. And he finally died, and we had to move on with our actual work, you know. And I said, do you guys see how something so stupid as playing Pac-Man for a few minutes brought us together in this way? And they're like, yeah. And I said, this is what video arcades used to be like. And they're like, oh, so it wasn't about being the master gamer. It's like, no, it was about, well, I mean, that, yes, but it was about being around people who all had this similar interest. And like, it was sad that my generation, you know, saw the rise and the fall of the arcade and the video store. I'm not so sad to see the video store grow, but, and you know, now arcades are in bars for people my age who grew up with those games. So tit for tat, right? So Ready Player One challenge is an example of gamification. The kids are literally doing what the kids in the books are doing, and I think that's just super cool. And of course, how do I come up with this stuff? I come up with this stuff because I've been playing D&D my whole life, and I want books to be as interactive as they possibly can be. So that's Ready Player One challenge. I'll put up another project when it becomes pertinent. We got some cool things with World War II that we've designed here at Harrisburg North Middle School, and lots of others. So as they come up, I'll let you know about them. If you want to know more about the Ready Player One unit, I guess use the comments box and leave an email address or something and ask questions and stuff and things, and I'll maybe answer you. Have a great day.